I'd like to take a minute to talk about martial arts systems and what they are. There's a lot of confusion about what martial arts systems are, and that confusion makes it very difficult for people to actually study the martial arts. So you have to understand that a system is a framework that's designed to help you look at and understand an aspect of conflict. So when you're looking at a system, its job is basically to teach you about aspects of conflict, certain aspects of conflict, and depending on what the system is what aspects it will teach, right? So for example, Western boxing will teach you methods for defending against and attacking unarmed in a striking context with the upper body only, right, or with the hands only specifically. A kickboxing system will add to that and teach you something about using your legs and kicking and defending against kicks. A grappling system will teach you about methods to wrestle, and different grappling systems will teach you different kinds of things and different ways you might grapple. So the system's designed to illustrate for you and give you a framework to work with aspects of a part of fighting. And so that's all a system really is. It's to help you get better and to understand an aspect of fighting. But when people look at systems, they think that the system is the event, right? And so by is the event, what I mean is either the system is the fight, right? So like this system is the way fighting is, and that's not true of any system. The only exception maybe being a sports system that teaches to the sport, which the sport is the method you're looking at. But outside of sport fighting, there is no system that can teach you what is fighting, because it's always changing and adapting and evolving depending on the situation, right? Where you're at, who the people are, what we have available to us, stuff like that. So it's always changing. So no system can really teach you what fighting is. Or people think that a martial arts system is the event because they think somehow that the martial art is a person or something, or that if you train enough in the martial art, you 100% can represent what that system is. And that's not true either, right? So systems can only give you ideas and help you look at an aspect of the conflict, and they aren't the conflict themselves, and they can't stand up for themselves, right? So, if you wanted to compare Western wrestling and Western boxing, and you put them together, there's going to be strengths and weaknesses of the two people. There's always the medium of the person that the system has to go through. So you really can never compare Western boxing and Western wrestling. They can't compare them directly because there's the medium of the person. And the medium of the person is the important thing, right? The system is designed to teach you something, the person who's studying it, something. But the important thing is to understand the system is not the event. The system is not the person who does the fighting, and it is not the fight. It's just a framework that you can work with and help you to understand a part of a fight. So what is the system, and what does the system do? Basically, martial arts systems, they take an aspect of fighting and they give you something to work with in that aspect. And it's really hard. The system becomes really complicated and a lot becomes involved the more things we add to the system. So it's almost impossible, it probably is completely impossible, to have an absolutely complete martial arts system that looks at all aspects of conflict. Right? 'Cause conflict's a huge category. And even if you get into physical conflict, only want to look at physical conflict, it's also a huge subject matter, right? It's huge because not only do you have to understand all the unarmed methods of doing things, right? So like all the ways to use your body, and that would be huge. That would be a gigantic system in and of itself, like all the ways to punch and kick and strike, and it would include biting and clawing, and all the things that might be useful to fighting would have to be in that system. Then we'd have to have all the aspects of weapon training, right? And so you could have basic handheld weapons, and that would be in and of itself a huge category. Everything doing with clubs and everything to do with blades and projectile weaponry, all these things, that would all have to be included, and that would be a big system. And then you would also have to start to include other things that we use in conflict, right? So people use helicopters in conflict, people use horses in conflict, people use all kinds of things, and saying horses, there's another aspect we'd have to include in that, which is historical elements. So do you want to look at things from the past and things from the modern day? So a complete martial arts system would probably be impossible because it would involve too much. So what we do really simply is we break down aspects of fighting and we put them in systems. And people who are interested in studying the different aspects can just go to the other smaller systems and study what that's about, right? The military has really nice ways of looking at this. If You look at what someone does in the military. You know, maybe they studied in an escape and evasion school, and then they studied in a sniper school, and they took martial art hand-to-hand combatives. You know, and you can see that they picked out all these things for what they want to do, or, you know, communications. I mean, that's an aspect of conflict. Lots of different parts that they can pick and choose to comprise what they want to do. So you study the system not to become the ultimate complete warrior in the world, but instead to improve yourself in those different aspects of what the martial arts are, right? So the different aspects. The first part is the context for the system. So that's the dominating factor of the system. And the context is, what are we going to do with this system? So it could be knife fighting, for example. Knife fighting could be our system. And that's our context. We're only going to look at knife fighting, and it does need to be a little more simplified, most likely, to make a good system. Because, I mean, you could just have the whole world of knife fighting, but that includes a lot of things like different size knives. All kinds of stuff has to be involved in that. So we'll say we're going to look at a system for knife fighting that is armed versus unarmed. I'm always going to be armed, right? So we're looking at a system where I'm always going to have a knife, and other people aren't going to have a knife, and I'm fighting them. And of course, that could be one-on-one or multiple attackers. I could be looking at all kinds of aspects. It could be in the dark. It could be, you know, in crazy environments. You know, we could be in the water, whatever. Who knows why I want my system? But that's the first part, is the context, right? So if we have a knife fighting system, and each context is going to be specific to the martial arts system, right? So there's rifle context, there's helicopter context, there's unarmed context, there's kicking contests and wrestling contexts, all kinds of contexts. But that's the first part of our system. The first part we need is, what is our context? What is the system to do? The next is theory of use. So theory of use is what we're going to do within that context, right? So for example, if we're looking at our knife system, I could have a defensive theory of use, which maybe I always keep the knife in the reverse grip, and I keep it in the back hand. I use my front hand here to push people away from me, and when they get close, I can use my knife in a powerful hammer motion to attack them, right? So that would be a defensive theory for our knife fighting system. I could have an offensive theory, right? Whereas, like, I'm going to keep my knife in the foregrip and the forehand, so that way, anyone who comes at me, I'm going to attack them, and I'm going to be marching towards people, and I'm not going to be in a defensive posture at all. I'm going to be attacking. So there's lots of theories of use I could have. So our first part is context. What's the system for? The second part is, how are we going to use the system within that context? So what's our outlook on the context itself? And then the next, and this is really the last step of all systems, is how are we going to teach those things to people, right? So how are we going to transmit the knowledge? So first step is context, second step is theory of use, third step is transmission. So how are we going to transmit what we know about this idea, this context, to other people? So, and that would be stuff like physical exercise we're going to do, the kind of conditioning people have to be in, right? Do you have to be in extremely good shape? Do you have to have good cardio? Do you have to have really strong biceps? Do you have to, what are the physical requirements for that system? So that's going to be in it, the exercises we need to do, how we actually get the ideas across, right? So in a lot of traditional Japanese martial arts, for example, static kata is the way it's taught. So we're going to memorize this form, and by memorizing this form, we're going to learn the things that go into this, right? We're going to understand the theory of use and how we use the weapon and all the little technical details through kata. A modern idea that's really appearing a lot now is this idea of live training. So we're just going to put you in that context. Sport martial arts do this a lot. I'm just going to put you inside that context, and you're going to scramble around and see what happens, and we'll give you some ideas here and there from people who have been there themselves, and that's it. That's what we're going to do. So there's lots of ways we could transmit the things we know about it. So there's three parts to a system. The first part is the context of the system. The second part is the theory of use within that context, and the third part is transmission of the information within that context. So basically, I wanted to make this video so we could start to talk about what martial arts systems really are, as opposed to having this kind of crazy idea that the martial arts system itself is some kind of magical thing. It's either going to make you an ultimate invincible warrior, or that it can get up and fight on its own, or that once you know it, you're undefeatable, or who knows. We have lots of crazy ideas about what systems are. But the truth is, system's a really nice thing to look at to help you understand an aspect of conflict. And as martial artists, that's what we study. We study conflict. So understanding different systems and how they work, and how you want to to use them and implement them is very important. If you're looking at yourself in some situation, so you regularly get beat up by the neighborhood kids, and how are you going to stop that? Well, they usually they punch me. So, well, first thing I guess I need to do is to learn how to defend myself against punches. So, I should look at a system that talks about defending against punches, right? So, Western boxing would probably be a great system to study to learn how to defend against those punches. And then you keep getting in a fight with those kids, and they don't hurt you as much anymore, but you really can't do anything to stop them. So it's like, well, then how can I stop them? It's like, and you start weighing your options. Maybe I need to learn a lot about striking. Maybe I need to learn how to grapple and take one of them down. You study the system to help you understand different aspects of conflict. And conflict's loaded with lots of different aspects, right? And I really basically just touched on the physical aspects. There's also non-physical aspects, There's verbal confrontation. There's mental ideas about what's happening. There's lots of things can happen inside of conflict. And so you should never look to one system to answer everything, and you should never, demonize a system for not doing what you wanted it to do. You should try and understand the system for what it's designed to do, and look at it that way. So this is a little bit about systems. I hope it helps some of you get a better idea of what's going on with systems in the martial arts. I'm Chris Heim. Thanks a lot.